The controller I use the most and why. This is the newest version of the Furin Arcade FRS, and today I'm going to give you 5 reasons why it's the controller I use more than any other controller that I own. Now, full disclaimer, Furin Arcade sent this controller to me completely free of charge for the purposes of making this. Number 1. Button feel. The buttons on this controller feel amazing. I absolutely love them. Underneath each one of these buttons is a Cherry MX switch. A lot of controllers use Sanwa buttons, or the Hori controllers come with Hori buttons, but one of the main prevailing trends with these controllers is being able to hot swap your own Cherry MX switches, and those of course are the same key switches that you get in gaming keyboards or even just regular keyboards that just feel really nice. I can actually choose which switches I put into each and every button, and so on the action buttons on the right side I've actually got speed silver key switches, and on the directions buttons I've actually got clicky blue switches. When you do technical inputs, you need to know that you've done down, forward, forward. You need to know exactly how many of these directions you've done in your head, especially if you're playing any of the older fighting games that have really strict input readers. They've got these keycaps, which I believe are made by Punk Workshop, and that's a good thing because it means they're going to be easy to replace if you lose them. I just love the way that it feels specifically on this controller. You could get the same Cherry MX switches and these Punk Workshop keycaps and put them into a different controller and it would feel absolutely different. It just bounces back up with a springiness that I just absolutely love. Reason number 2, the size of this controller. As you can see, it is not the smallest, but neither is it the largest. And the weight of this controller, it's not the lightest by a long shot. In fact, it's actually kind of hefty in feel, and I actually love that. When I go out to an arcade and I want to have a controller that I can plug into an arcade machine, I'm not bringing this one along with me. But when I'm playing on my own computer, when I'm streaming, when I'm making videos, just having this thing on my lap, it's just really, really solid. Just the fact that I can bounce my legs up left and right because, you know, you're just moving around and you're just chatting with your stream. And when you've got a controller that is a little bit wider and a little bit heavier, it is less likely to fall off your lap and slide off your lap. Again, if you're just playing the fighting game and you're not moving around and acting like a monkey when you're streaming, a completely light and small controller is not an issue whatsoever. I love tools. Mike Figgis, he was talking about how you treat your camera if you're a photographer, a bit like a rifle if you're in the army. Someone hands it to you, you need to learn everything about it, how to take it apart, how to put it back together. The fact that this is your tool that you rely on, it's gonna stand in your way of victory if it's done poorly. And I just love that this thing is constructed fantastically, but also just the size-wise, I can just kind of hug it the way I used to hug my books when I was in high school. If you showed up to an orchestra and you were holding a double bass, or you're holding a violin, or drumsticks, this is the object that you hold that proves that you're supposed to be here. A bit like having a uniform, because fighting gamers don't have a uniform. Anyway, we can talk about all that over coffee in a future video. Reason number 3 why I love the FRS, this giant control panel. Now, this may not seem large to you, but if you've seen any of my reviews, you know that I have these teeny tiny controllers with incy-mincy little buttons, and often they're not even labeled. As you can see here on the newest version of the FRS, it's got those same giant buttons that you can press that are super easy to press. They don't feel fragile, which is great. They don't hurt my fingers because they're not like these awkward little sawn off bits of plastic that kind of dig into your finger. They're nice and large, they don't hurt to press, but more importantly, on the newest version, as you can see, they are labeled. They're not labeled very clearly though. ST probably means start. You can see that the person who created Furin Arcade is a retro gamer. Do I think there's some room for improvement? Absolutely yes. When it comes to the control panel, I think these buttons could be even larger or better labeled, and I think I would love better access to the trackpad L3 and R3 buttons. Maybe just turn them into actual giant buttons and put them somewhere else on the controller. Reason number 4, I absolutely love the layout of the buttons on here. Now, I've actually built controllers myself. Here's one I made earlier. This is a controller I've made and actually shown you how to make. When I made this controller, I made it like the layout that perfectly matches my hand. And so I do really like the layout of this controller. But I also was opened, and I had my eyes opened to the idea of spreading the buttons out a little bit further. There are controllers where the buttons are really, really squished together so that your hands are coming in at this perfect angle and you've got them as squished together as you can. But with the FRS, one of the actual main features, which I'm not really talking about today, is that it's modular. You can actually take the right side portion off and replace it with a different button layout. But as a result of having this modular system, I think that just naturally led to this layout being a little bit more spaced apart. Now, on normal arcade sticks, they actually mostly use something which is called the Vuelix layout, where the arcade stick is very close to the buttons. But on controllers like the Hori Fighting Edge, as you can see, the arcade stick is moved a little bit further to the left and the buttons are spaced out a little further here, and these buttons come down a little bit further. All of this stuff does matter. Just ergonomically, your arms just fall into a completely different place when the buttons are spaced a little bit further apart or they're angled a little bit more, and I don't think there is a perfect solution, which is why I often say in these videos, it's really important that you show up to your local fighting game event or tournament and just see if you can just ask someone. I very much doubt there would ever be a moment where someone would say, no, I'm not gonna let you try my controller. If you go up to someone and say, that controller looks sick, can I try it? They'll probably be like, yeah, man, I want you to buy the controller that I support. I do like the spacing of this controller. I feel like this jump button is a little bit further away from these direction buttons than is on many other controllers. Also love the noir style layout where it goes up and then it comes back down again, because it just magically fits. The way that my fingers feel on these buttons is very, very natural. And as you can see, I'm getting a little bit excited and it's all about button layouts, and now I'm starting to realize how much of a nerd I am. It's not nerd, is it? It's geek. But finally, here we are, and it's number 5. One of the main reasons why I absolutely love this controller is the way it looks. You can customize this controller completely. What's really strange is that a lot of controllers do have artwork that covers all over the front of the controller with no borders or anything, but for whatever reason, the shape and size of the FRS is the one that really spoke to me. Maybe this is like American legal pad, notepad kind of shape, whatever it is. This shape works really, really well for artwork. And that means you can draw characters here on the right, you can draw characters here on the left, you can have stuff down here, background elements on the bottom, or you could even have characters. You could have characters all over the top. You could have characters all over this thing. This thing is just an amazing canvas if you're an artist or you know an artist. It could also just be down to these rounded rectangle edges. There's just something about the design. Also, there's something about the way that the plexi work. It just looks kind of like the painting is going to like spill off to the side like a Dali painting. You can tell that I've only ever seen one Dali painting. In the original version, I had these standard gray keycaps, but on the new version, I've been given, I didn't even ask for this, blue keycaps over here and clear keycaps over here, which perfectly match the color of the artwork, so that it's got like the ocean beach area over here and the sandy sort of mountainous area over here. Just taste little things like that. One thing I will suggest, if you are getting custom artwork made for this controller, consider the fact that it is actually modular, and so you could have the left side of the controller be removed with the artwork and replace it with a completely different character. So actually the reason I drew it like this when I made the artwork for this originally, I wanted Felicia over here and Ryu over here so I could replace them with other characters. So maybe I could have Ken here instead, and I could have Chun-Li over here on the left instead. Seemed like such a good idea, but then I never actually drew anything else for it, so it didn't really quite follow through. So those are the 5 main reasons why I use the FRS more than any other controller I use. This is changing a little bit now because I've got so many new controllers coming in, but especially last year when I got the original version of the FRS, I really didn't use anything else. And also, I ended up choosing it as the controller that I brought to EVO Japan, which is the only tournament I've really attended this year. But you probably want to know what's actually changed since the prototype model, so let's run through the changes really quickly. First of all, it now says Furin FRS on the front of the case. The non-slip padding on the back no longer extends to the edges. It's got a sort of 3 or 4 millimeter gap around the edges, and that's a good thing because on the original, as you can see, the edges have started to fray. I don't really know why this change has been made, but these screws here at the bottom are flat, and these other screws around the sides and the top, they've actually got round tops. I don't know if maybe he just ran out of screws that day. Like I mentioned before, there are now labels on the control panel where there weren't before. And the modular design seems to be finalized. Before, it was actually this piece, and that was the entire top plate of the controller underneath the plexi. It now actually has a lip going around the whole top of the controller, and you actually put those modules into to the controller, a bit like putting ingredients in a pie. And as a result, you no longer have a seam going around the edges because you can't actually see the modules themselves. They're completely encased inside. Now for the version I've been sent, which will most likely be more expensive, it is PS5 compatible, which is fantastic. But again, that's something that's optional. You find that on the website. And now a few things have changed regarding SOCD. The way it was shipped to me, it actually works in the standard CPT legal mode. So when you bring this to a Street Fighter tournament, you'll be absolutely fine because pressing down and up will lead to neutral instead of what it used to be by default, which is holding down and up, which would lead to your character jumping constantly. There are a few other changes, like this USB port is better encased and more protected than it used to be. And there's one tiny little change. The plexi is not exactly the same size as the rest of the case. On the original version, on the prototype I was sent, it was almost exactly the same. On the new version, it's a very consistent 1.5mm gap all the way around. It makes absolutely no difference to the controller, and you probably didn't even notice it until I mentioned it. Listen, that's pretty much it for the Furin Arcade FRS, the production model. I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to share why it's the controller I use more than all of my other controllers. Listen, I could probably make another 10 videos just talking about how you could take advantage of the features of the controller. Again, it's not better than the other controllers. I just use it, I just end up using it more than the others. That might change though in the future. There are so many new controllers coming in, and who knows, maybe the new features of these new controllers will trump the benefits that I thought I loved so much about the FRS. If you're interested to see whether I end up going for a different controller and using that one more, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment below, what controller do you find most attractive, especially if you haven't bought one yet. Of all of the reviews that I've done, like which of these controllers, especially the leverless ones, which one takes your fancy the most? Let me know in the comments section below. Like the video if you haven't done so already. I've been NihongoGamer. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see you real soon.